Before we get into today's episode, I'd love to introduce our sponsor, Jane, a clinic management software and EMR. The team at Jane understands that clocking out from the clinic doesn't always mean you're clocking out for the day. Instead, it's often the start to charting long into the evening. With time-saving charting features like custom smart narratives, chart duplication, and dictation, Jane helps you finish charting your patient or client notes during work hours, not after hours. And to save you even more time, you have access to Jane's chart template library that's fully stocked with pre-made templates that have been generously shared by practitioners in the community. You can even customize them further with charting tools like side-by-side photos, checkboxes, and range scales. To see how Jane can help you free up your evenings from admin tasks, head to meet.jane.app/more-time to book your personalized demo. But if you're ready to get started, you can use the code wellness1mo at the time of sign up for a 1-month grace period applied to your new account. Hi there, and welcome to the Wellness Center Creators Podcast. I'm Kendall Hagenson.
And I'm Anna Rudell. We're thrilled to have you join us on this journey of creating innovative, patient-centered wellness centers.
As experienced health and wellness providers, we've seen firsthand the challenges of delivering comprehensive, holistic care to our patients.
That's why we created this podcast, to share the knowledge, strategies, and insights we've gained from our own experiences and from connecting with experts in the field.
Each episode, we'll dive into a different aspect of building and growing a successful wellness center, from developing a strong multidisciplinary team to implementing cutting-edge technologies and treatment approaches.
We'll also share practical tips, resources, and real-world examples to help you overcome common obstacles and streamline your processes.
Our goal is to empower you with the tools and confidence you need to create a thriving wellness center that truly makes a difference in your patients' lives.
So whether you're just starting out or looking to take your existing practice to the next level, you're in the right place.
Get ready to learn, grow, and be inspired. Let's create something amazing together.
Welcome to the Wellness Center Creators Podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Wellness Center Creators Podcast. Today on the show, we have Anna back as our co-host.
Yay.
And our yay! And our wonderful guest today is a friend and colleague of mine here in Vancouver, Washington, Mike Nieto. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, guys. Ladies, I should say.
Thank you. Mike, let's have you start out by introducing yourself to our audience and just sharing about, a little bit about your career story and
Sure.
how you got to be doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike Nieto, I ran my own construction company for about 20 years, and I've worked in the construction industry mostly all of my adult life. And I grew up in Las Vegas and worked a lot with my uncles and grandpa, who were all contractors. So I've kind of been around the industry for really the majority of my life, and it's been quite a journey from beginning to where I am today. In the summer times, I'd go and work with my uncle or my grandpa, and so I learned how hard that work was. They were all masonry contractors, which was very difficult work, which is why I didn't go into that end of the world, and eventually got a job working at an engineering firm as a runner, just getting plans signed, and then that opened up a door to go into the survey part of civil engineering. So I learned all about construction staking and boundaries and land surveying, and did that for several years until I ended up needing a job and went to work as a grade setter. That's a guy who works on the ground for a heavy highway contractor in Oregon. And many years would pass by. I moved up the ladder and up to superintendent, and worked for a few different companies over about a 7-year period. And then in 2005, I decided it was time to go do my own thing. And so I spent almost 20 years doing that. And here I am today. Uh, so last year I decided to shut my business down and start my third act, as I call it.
Yeah. And a big part of your story is how passionate you are about mental health.
Yes,
And I'd love if you could share a bit about your nonprofit, Dig Deep, and kind of the passion behind that
sure.
and the purpose of it.
Yeah. So, working in construction my whole life, I always found it very curious about how people were treated, which was not always very great. And I understand that it's a really gritty and tough industry. And so, um, it's in general, the work is hard and it usually takes some hard men to do hard work. And although most of them were really good guys, you could spend all day with a guy out in the field and he might be pretty short with you, maybe have a bad temper, but you get after work with him and he's a great guy. He's really easy to get along with. You have fun, all that kind of stuff. And it was really a theme that I saw. And it really was part of my own kind of realization, working for different companies over the years, that even though as hard as I would work and as much as I would do, sometimes I would just get treated, really poorly. And I quit a really good job one day because somebody just didn't know how to talk to me and actually just treat me like a human. So when I started my business, it was really like, there has to be a better way to do this with people. And although I made a lot of mistakes in the process, I also learned a lot about people. And what I found over my career was that I enjoyed building people more than I enjoyed building projects. The projects would always get done, but there was a lot more to learn in the people department and really trying to figure out how to get the best out of them. And so I, of course, had my own mental health journey, went through a terrible divorce in the time that I started my business. And it was at that time when I really kind of started to dig deep in myself to figure out, why did I make the choices that I did? Mm. So it got me really curious about why with people. That led to eventually having, a few guys that were working for me over the years who were also outstanding human beings, but boy, were they tough on people. And a lot of times, people would quit and they'd leave my business because they didn't want to work with certain individuals. So I was pretty open with my team and people in the industry about my own personal journey and learning about me. And over the years, sharing those stories with different people that I worked with, I would always see that they were usually open to hear it. And then when it would get quiet, maybe they'd come and ask more questions. So one day I had a guy who, great, great guy, I'd known him for many, many years. Another person came in to quit because of him. And I said, hey, we can't have this. Like, we're in the people building business. That's our number one job. So we've got to figure out a better way to do things. And so I told him, I shared a little bit of my own story with them. And I said, look, we have two choices here. One is you can stay the way you are. And the next person who comes in and wants to quit because of you, I'm going to have to let you go. Or two is you can learn a new way and we can all win. So we thought about it. And I said, Dave, you're a great guy. You're super smart. I know you have a good heart. You've just got to learn some things about you. Somebody probably taught you to be this way. My guess is it was your dad. And he nodded his head in agreement. And I said, the great thing is you have all the right tools to learn a new way. So I gave him a credit card. I gave him a phone number. And I said, here, go make an appointment with them and just go tell them your story. I said, otherwise, I don't want to get to this other decision that I'll have to make because you're too valuable. So he reluctantly agreed, and I checked on him over, the course of months, and we could see changes in how he was treating people. And one day I went out to a job, and if you knew this guy, you'd understand what a stoic character he is. He really didn't have a lot to say, and when he did, he would never even look at you when he was speaking. And I walked up and I said, hey, Dave, how's it going? And he said, good. And I said, how's all the, your story work stuff going? And he looked at me and he had a tear in his eye. And this guy now is, 60, early 60s. So he was probably in his early 50s. And if you knew him, you'd understand how powerful that was for me and how powerful it was for him. And he said, Mike, they said they could help me. And I said, of course they can. Like, you've got this. It's the answers are in you. They just got to come out of you. And so he continued his journey. And it was at that point that I decided, something had to be done more with this. And so in 2017, I formally, filed for all the paperwork to start my nonprofit. And really the goal was to bring awareness to people that I wanted to see them become their best. And so many people in the construction industry end up in the construction industry just by chance. It's not like a lot of these guys planned their whole life. I'm going to go into construction. They maybe they came from a rough upbringing. They don't have a college education, all this stuff. And there's filled with these really good people, but there's not a lot of vulnerability in construction. Lots of ego. And it's, a male dominated industry. In fact, the highest. More men work in construction than any other industry, and it's like 90%. So lots of men out there just need help. And so I started that and offering employees that worked for me a year's worth of therapy on my dime. I would give them referrals. I had kind of a network of people that I would work with, and they'd have to pay a copay. And I learned that so many people just didn't really know a therapist, didn't know how to get a hold of one. How do you pick one? So I felt like if I could make it easier and at least get them in with someone and share my own story and be vulnerable with them, it would make them more apt to be receptive to it. And it turned out I was right. And I saw some incredible things happen with people. And so, today I'm not doing that as much, but I really want to be able to go and share more of my story, how I got here, what I've been through, which has been a lot, and encourage people that they all have the ability to learn and grow and become better. And they just got to start with themselves and digging deep.
Well, what you've created is so beautiful, Mike. And you and I have talked, quite a bit about this over the years. And you're, as a boss and as the creator of this nonprofit, you really have impacted so many lives in a positive way. And you've also saved lives. And I think something you're very passionate about is for more people to understand the high incidence of suicide in the construction industry. And it's one of the highest of any industry.
Yeah.
And I think, most people don't think of that. They don't really consider that construction would be that way, but especially in commercial construction, right? This is a very high stress. Employees or team members are put in really high stress situations.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's people ask me all the time when I mention that fact that it is the highest rate. 53 out of every 100,000, kill themselves in the construction and mining industry, and the average rate in the United States is 14. So there's a huge gap, and they ask me why, and I say, well, if you just think about the math, that men in particular kill themselves at nearly 4 times the rate that women do. So if we just use some logic and math, we know that, of course, an industry that is 90% men will naturally have a higher rate of suicide. And it's also, guys that are my age. I'm 52 now, working on trying to be younger every day. But guys like me, and in particular, white guys, they kill themselves even more. So my brother, 2.5 years ago, took his life. He was in the military for a long time and he ran a construction battalion. So it's really, anytime I bring it up to anybody, they are just shocked when they find that fact.
It's it's unbelievable to me that this is not a known fact. And I applaud you for not only taking a leadership role in your construction company, but also trying to educate people on this absolutely astonishing number. It's, my head when you first started talking was, well, of course, I'm curious as to why Mike went to mental health first, because as an acupuncturist, we see construction workers all the time who have terrible repetitive stress injuries.
Mm-hmm.
But the mental health, obviously, you don't always see unless you're observing behavior or you're actually observing your crew as you have been doing. I'm just blown away by your story, Mike. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I tell people, most people when they run across construction, you're probably angry by being inconvenienced by them. Like, oh, you're putting sewer down the middle of the road. I have to get to work on time. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that, people have flipped us off or yelled at us or even spit on us as we're just out there trying to do our jobs. And, the reality is, without these people, none of us, our lives would be terribly different. So I think from the exterior, it's a very gritty industry. And people just look at that and say, oh, they must be really strong. But really, it's an ego thing. It's not about strength. And we all know that ego is the thing that we put in front of us to protect what's broken behind us.
Yeah.
So I think most people just don't equate the two to go along, because they just look at these men, mostly men and women too, but as just these people who are tough and rough. And I mean, my grandpa, every day when I went to work with him as a kid, he brought 3 tools with him: a 6-pack of beer, a carton of cigarettes, and a 45. And that's how he solved his problems. And, it is an epidemic in this industry. And we have a huge labor shortage. And who wants to go work in an industry that has these kind of statistics?
Tell us about your nonprofit, Mike. Tell us, are you working full time in it now, or are you doing a little bit of half and half, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, it's in a little bit of a stall mode right now because I'm starting this third act. Ultimately, my personal goal is to be able to help enable and create a national program in the construction industry to get people the help that they need. I want to see, the men and women of construction getting really good access to, whether it's acupuncture, mental health services, naturopathic doctors, all these different kinds of modalities that were never talked about. I'm just naturally a curious person, so I always ask a lot of questions and I always want to learn more. And people have always fascinated me. So my goal would be to, whether it stays in the nonprofit, I'd like to keep that because I think that there's certainly some value, but really getting people services and making them aware that there are things that exist. And what I've found in going around and speaking at different events is, most of the time, actually, I'd say all the time, every time I go and share my story, people come back and say, thanks for finally saying it. And then they go on to share their own personal story, or maybe it's a spouse, maybe she has a husband that works in the industry and said, how can I get my husband the help that he needs? And really, everybody needs it. So we just have to make it safe enough and people feel comfortable enough or safe enough to actually say, hey, I could use some help. And what would that look like? So both of you folks do coaching. I want to do more of that. I want to be able to go and really encourage people to say, hey, here's the hell I've been through in my life. And at 52 years old, after what I've been through, I'm stronger than I've ever been in my life. I'm certainly have gained a lot of wisdom through many losses. But if it wasn't for my foundation, my own personal foundation, digging deep and repairing all those things that happened to me growing up and through my adult life, it's hard to say if I'd even be here today. So if I can do it, I can certainly help other people do it too.
Mike, I'm curious if you could speak to something that I know you're great at as a boss and a leader, something you said earlier about making it safe enough to have the conversation. And this is something that you worked very hard on in your company. And we have, our listeners are business owners and leaders. And so I'm curious if you can speak to those kind of strategies that you learned over time of how to create that safety in the workplace.
Well, I call it being uncomfortably safe. And what I mean by that is, this morning I spent time with Ron, the personal trainer, and
On our team.
yeah, on your team, exactly. And Ron Ron worked me really hard, and it was very uncomfortable. and we today was leg day, and so, but the one thing that Ron did was, as we were adding the weights and doing the stuff, he was there that whole time. So he made sure that if I were to go to failure, he would be there to make sure that I didn't break anything. So it allowed me to get really, really uncomfortable, and it was, but it was safe. And so when I talk about uncomfortably safe, it's that same thing. And the first thing that I had to do was learn how to be uncomfortable myself, because nobody was going to fire me, right? I kind of had that part covered, but I had to get uncomfortable and share and be vulnerable with my team about not everything, of course, but I didn't have an employee who worked for me who they all have seen me cry, every single one of them. And some of those tears are sadness, and some of those tears are just pure joy. But it was me, and I'm not very good at faking me. So the more that I was vulnerable and people gave me some safety as well, the easier it was for them. And not that we need everybody to come in and, rip open their can of worms in front of everybody. But the culture really was more about, hey, we need to make sure we give people space. And if there's a struggle, we need to make sure that we're honoring them and allowing them the time and opportunity to, if they have a hard day, hey, I need to take a day off because I've got some stuff. And then being curious and saying, hey, is there something that we can help you with? And really, in a lot of ways, the more people who, over the time that I was doing Dig Deep pretty actively in my business, the more people who were in Dig Deep, the more it was talked about. And then one employee would say, hey, I see this person showing up in this certain way, and it's different than I've seen it in the past. Like, what's in that Kool-Aid? How can I have some of that? I'd like that. And so, you start with one, and my one was me, and then it was Dave, and then it grew and grew and grew. And so I think just being humble individually for me and showing that, but also the strength that comes from being humble, creates this really dynamic situation where people don't feel like they're going to be judged. They're actually going to be cared for and heard and seen. And I don't think there's anything more that people want in this world than to be seen. There's not a recipe. I think it's easy for me because it's who I am.
Yeah.
And if you start with one and they get it, they spread it to the next person and the next person and the next person. And, at the end of when I shut my business down, the people who came back and shared a little bit more. I had one girl who worked for me, and she has a pretty tragic upbringing. And she said, Mike, if it wasn't for you in this company, I don't even know if I'd be alive today. So thanks for saving my life.
Yeah.
And I just remind them all, I didn't save anybody's life. You saved your own life. I just made it available for you to know that you actually could do it.
Yeah.
And so pat yourself on the back.
I think it's so important for our listeners to hear from someone who's not in a helping profession, who's not a healthcare provider and is in this different industry, and that leaders can care in this way, right? Across all industries, and that there's room to do it differently.
Absolutely. Yeah. That there is. And it's contagious. As much as a shitty attitude is contagious, a loving, kind, humble one is that and then some. Because the essence of all of us is that. But we have to feel safe enough to be able to actually show it.
Mike, I'm curious. I've been thinking the whole time, because I know that you have appreciated acupuncture in your life, and because we have Anna here as our co-host today, I wonder if you might share just how acupuncture has impacted your life physically and mentally.
Well, as luck would have it, I ended up doing all those things because there was an event, right? An event of being unwell. And so between a naturopathic doctor and an acupuncturist, those two people got my health back. I had my appendix out, and 2 days later, after my appendix was out, I felt better, but all of a sudden I had all these nerve issues going on in my head, and I'm certain it came from stress. Running a construction company through a pandemic. And, a couple things I would say. One is just being connected to somebody that is not trying to give you some drugs and numb you, because that was my first experience, was going to my doctor and having him giving me this really nasty drug called projavelin, which, had I known what it would do to me, I probably would have never taken it, but it was in a lot of pain, so I did it. And so when I started doing it, it was really out of necessity, and I'm like, I want this pain to go away. And so, with Tamika's help, she taught me things and showed me all the different connections, and I'm pretty open. So I'm like, yeah, what do I have to lose? And really, within a matter of about, 45 days, they got me pretty well, and it really changed my life forever. I was out at a motocross track yesterday, and there was a guy out there on Saturday, and his arm is just freezing up. And I said, have you ever tried acupuncture? You should go try it. Like, it helps. There are just so many things that we don't teach people anymore, or that we never have, to be honest. That's the real truth. And so it also, not only did it start helping me physically, but it also taught me more about me and about my body and what I should and shouldn't be doing. And every time I see her, she's like, "What's wrong now, Mike?" It's like, stop coming in when just something's wrong. And, but she really has taught me, like, really what's happening in my body. And so when I go and experience it, it's like, oh yeah. And then she'll give me other things to say, hey, you should be stretching every morning, which I'd never done in my life. But, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at my French bulldog, and you know what he does every morning? He stretches. every single morning. He does his downward dog. He does all of that stuff. And nobody taught him about anything, right? So, but he knows. And so why don't we know? I think maybe at one time we did, but it's time to learn more. And it really did. I mean, my back has been frozen up several times and she works through it. She helped me with my wrist. And she certainly helped me with my nerve issues because it was a really painful episode in my life. I couldn't even go outside. It was too cold. And the nerves were so activated that I didn't go to work for about 45 days. But I was in her office quite a bit, trying
Yes.
everything we could to get the nerves fixed. And I went to see my doctor one time and I had an MRI and I never went back. So I think
that says it all.
That disease, which they call funny, they call it the suicide disease, trigeminal neuralgia. And I know why, because it is ridiculously painful. So all I know is I went there, I did these things, I saw a naturopath, I got some good supplements, I saw the acupuncturist many times, and I haven't had a single issue since then. And most people who have that, it's a lifetime of disease that is almost incurable because they don't really even know what causes it. So, I mean, stick all the needles in you want. I'm ready.
You know, Mike, one thing that I keep coming back to as you talk is just your overarching sense of curiosity. You're curious about yourself, you're curious about your employees, you're curious about others. And I think it's that curiosity that has really driven you in life to find your healing path, to find alternatives that might support those around you, and to create this incredible resource for other construction workers. Tell us about the third chapter, as you said.
What's next for you, Mike?
The third act.
The third act, that was right.
Yeah, the third act. The third act is going to be the best one. In fact, I left this morning after seeing Ron, and I was just having a little conversation with myself. And I was looking forward to doing this today. And I said, you're going to go out and do amazing things in this third act. And you've heard the saying, right? Hurt people, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of that in the construction industry. I experienced it myself. But what I also know is healed people heal people. And so in my third act, I'd like to take the lessons that I learned of the hurt people hurting people. And I'd like to flip the script. And I'd now like to take, at least the most healed version of me today, which I'll never be done. Life is filled with lots of lessons and stuff. But I want to take the lessons that I learned in all my healing and start delivering those to, the people that are hurt. And that's going to come in the form of partnerships with folks like you. It's going to come in the form of going and sharing my story and my message with people, giving them some tips and tricks, maybe some books, all kinds of tools that some I've yet to discover. But going out and sharing my story, I think, is the number one thing I can do to get people being aware of it. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with TED Talks. There are many of them out there. And they're powerful because they're a really good story about something very important. And if you go look at some of the most successful people coming from a TED Talk, Brene Brown, her whole world just blew up after that. And that's what I'd like to see. Not just my world blowing up, but like the world of suicide in construction. And just getting my arms wrapped around it. And they're pretty big these days because I've been going to the gym, but just making sure that people know that, hey, there are better choices to make. And the goal would be to get everybody to their third act.
Yeah.
Where they're really doing everything that they were created to do to the best of their ability. And they have joy and peace in their heart. And they go and spread that in their communities where they live.
Mike, it has just been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I'm curious, if our listeners want to connect with you for speaking opportunities, how might they do that?
The best way right now would be through my LinkedIn page. You can just look me up on LinkedIn, look up Mike Nieto. I only have 3 initials after my name, and it's ETC, etc., because there's a lot more to come.
Nice. Mic drop. Thanks so much, Mike. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Wellness Center Creators podcast. We hope you found this episode informative and valuable.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and leaving a rating and review. Your support helps us reach more health and wellness professionals like you.
For additional resources, show notes, and more episodes, visit our website at wellnesscentercreators.com.
We'd love to connect with you and hear your thoughts, experiences, and questions. Feel free to reach out to us through our website or social media channels.
Once again, thank you for listening. We appreciate your dedication to providing exceptional patient care.
Join us next time as we continue exploring the world of wellness center creation. Until then, take care and keep making a difference.
Thanks for listening to the Wellness Center Creators podcast.